My name is Shane O'Donnell. My partner and I started Heartwood Mushrooms in 2017. We grow culinary and gourmet mushrooms on Manitoulin Island. Been giving workshops for the past couple of years, went around to all the elementary schools. I don't know if any of you have been to any of our workshops or talks before? No one? Okay, in any case, just want to get a feel for why everyone is here today. So do we have any mushroom lovers here right now? One mushroom lover, awesome. Who here just wanted to get out of class? Yeah, right on. Way to game the system. Cool. Thank you for being honest. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be learning how to cultivate mushrooms on logs basically from start to finish. And we're going to do the hands-on process. Everyone's going to get a chance if they want to play with the power tools, to inoculate and then to seal up the logs afterwards. So our journey begins 2 years before you want your mushroom. Right, you want to be looking for the right type of wood to pair with the mushroom. Right? Today we're going to be growing what's called oyster mushroom. And the oyster mushroom really likes the poplar trees. Right? Does anyone here know what a poplar tree looks like? Can you identify poplars? They're pretty much everywhere, right? So that's what we're going to be working with. I'm terrible at identifying trees in the winter time. So that's why I said we start 2 years prior. I like to do it in the summertime when I can actually see the leaves. I can't tell trees apart for the most part when they don't have any leaves on them. So in the summertime, you start walking around, start marking out your trees. If you have access to a forest, a woodlot where you are allowed to harvest the trees from, and you kind of start marking them out. Then in the winter time is when you want to harvest. Think about late winter time before the sap starts flowing, before the maple sap starts flowing. Does anyone have any guesses why that would be the time where you'd want to chop down a tree for mushrooms? Think about that for a second. What would happen once the sap starts flowing? There'd be sap everywhere. It'd be messy. Just don't want to deal with it. Any other guesses? Okay. When the sap starts flowing, the tree is starting to push all its nutrients and energy from the trunk out towards the tips of the branches and into the leaves. So if you were to harvest the tree in the springtime, when that is happening, you're losing a lot of the energy that is stored within the trunk during the wintertime. The more energy that's in the trunk during the wintertime, the more mushrooms you're going to get, and the better quality mushrooms that you're going to get, right? And we're putting a lot of energy into making these, and so you want to be setting yourself up for success at the very, very start. So late wintertime, before the maple sap starts flowing, you chop down the tree, or someone else chops down the tree that you're working with, and you're looking for logs that are about 4 to 6 inches in diameter, okay? Once you've felled those trees, chop them up into 3 to 4 foot long bolts. And I apologize if I'm using the metric system or the imperial system. I haven't converted over to metric yet for mushroom cultivation. So bear with me on this one. But those 3 to 4 foot long bolts, we call them, are a lot easier to move around. And you can keep them in the snow for 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks there. And you want to let them sit for a little while, right? If you were to chop down a tree and inoculate it with the mushroom tissue right away, the tree's immune system is actually going to fight it off for a while, and you probably won't even get any mushrooms off it. So if you wait a little while for the tree to fully die off, then your chances of getting these delicious mushrooms are going to be that much better. On the day before you are going to inoculate, which is actually putting the mushroom tissue into the log, you want to soak them for 24 hours. Luckily, Kristen has already harvested the logs at the right time and has soaked them. That's why they were wet and pretty heavy carrying them in there. So they are ready to go. So in just a second, we're going to switch over to that bench there, and I'm going to demonstrate how to drill the holes in there. The mushrooms that we are growing today digest and eat the sapwood of the tree, right? And the sapwood of the tree is that lighter ring outside, the sapwood there. So that's the stuff that's currently growing. The hardwood or the heartwood inside, the mushrooms will digest eventually, but it's not what's going to give you that first crop of mushrooms or even that second crop of mushrooms. This is an ideal size because as you get larger and larger in the logs, let's pick up this one. The ratio of heartwood to sapwood becomes much, much lower. See how much sapwood is in there versus the heartwood there? So 4 to 6 inches is your ideal size for what you want to be doing. Plus it starts getting really heavy and you just don't want to be dealing with that. Okay, so there's a couple tools that you can use. Most people have a drill and a drill bit. You can use it. I wouldn't advise it. It kind of sucks, right? I'll show you. So you're going. You got to do that 100 times per log, right? So that's really, really going to suck. So investing in proper tools is really, really nice. This is an angle grinder which spins, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 times faster than a drill. And it has this special bit. This is specialized for mushroom log cultivation. You can see it's slightly different than a drill bit. It's basically just meant to take chunks of the wood and pop it right out. Bit of a difference, okay? So the pattern that we're going for is 4 inches apart, what do we call that? 12 centimeters apart, right? And we're going to go about 6 centimeters up, but offset. So we're going to be making a diamond pattern, like this. Cool, so you make the zigzag, and we're going to do that all the way around the log. Typically, you don't want to drill into the ends. It's just not necessary. So then we're going to take this and we're going to move on to the next station where we're actually going to be inoculating it. So we're going to go to the first table to the left of Mr. Harfield there. So the stuff that we're using to grow these mushrooms today is called sawdust spawn, also known as a spawn block. This is this white stuff right here that has completely grown through sawdust. The white stuff is called mycelium, and that's actually the organism that we're dealing with. The mushroom is just a very temporary reproductive organ of the mycelium. So under the forest floor and in logs is this stuff called mycelium. And you can get this from spawn suppliers all around the world. They cost about $20 to $25 per block. And you want to take a look at it and make sure that it's white all over, or mostly white all over. You don't want any funky colors, any blues, any greens, any blacks, because that means that there's other types of mold in the bag. And if there's mold in the bag, that means that you're putting mold in the logs, which means that you're not going to be getting mushrooms, you're just going to be getting more mold, which is really not what we want. So I'll pass it around, and I encourage everyone to give it a thump, because it feels kind of nice. It feels like a ripe melon. If it kind of squishes, then you know it hasn't fully grown all the way through. I'll pass that around, take a look at it, and when we're done, yeah, it's satisfying. And while that's being passed around, I'm going to show you these. These are called inoculators. Sometimes they're called thumb inoculators, sometimes they're called palm inoculators. What we're going to be doing with this is we're going to open up the bag and we're going to be stabbing the mycelium with these inoculators and then injecting them right into the holes that we drill into the logs. The bit that I showed you before on the angle grinder is sized exactly to the same diameter as these inoculators right here. So these are purpose-built cultivation tools. It's a good idea to practice to practice good practices, for lack of better words. Don't cough in the bag. Try not to breathe into it. We're not working in a very sterile environment right now. We're outside anyways, but we want to help it along as much as we can. And it's as easy as this. Stick it in, and you put it in the log. And you're going to do that for all the holes in the log. And you want it to be flush with the top of the log. So everyone come around, come get closer, take a look. Right, so you can do, if you do a partial one, like that's really not what we want. You can actually even see some of the sapwood still there, and you really want that to be covered up. Mushroom grows when it's in contact with whatever it wants to be eating, so if there's space there, it's not going to grow nearly as well. Most people associate mushrooms with spores, which is really good because mushrooms produce spores, but you'll notice that we aren't using spores for this log right here. We're using mycelium, and the reason being is it's much like growing an apple tree from seed. If you plant a whole bunch of apple seeds, you have no idea what kind of apple tree you're going to get. It could be bitter, or it could be very sweet or sour. You have no idea. Same thing with mushrooms, right? If you start from the spores, you might not even get something that produces mushrooms. It might be kind of small. It might want to make mushrooms late in the season, or it might have a very, very fine temperature tolerance. So this mycelium right here has been cultivated over and over and over, and then selected for something that does really well on poplar in our climates. Once your entire log has been inoculated, move over to the waxing station, right here.
Smells like beeswax.
That is because it's beeswax. Okay. Yeah. So you can use a few different types of wax. Thanks, Nick. So there's beeswax. There's also cheese wax that you can use. And all you're going to be doing is dabbing it. I grab the worst one?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll grab a less worse one. Maybe we'll just take that one out of circulation.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. You can be dabbing it just over like that. And you can do a couple of holes at a time. And the reason being is you seal it up and you prevent moisture from escaping. This stuff right here is moist, and in a few hours it's going to dry out, which you don't want it to do. Mushrooms will not grow when it's dry. It also helps prevent bugs and grubs and slugs from burrowing their way into the logs and eating the mycelium, because a lot of critters love to eat mycelium. It's a very high nutrient substance. So waxing over the holes will basically allow you to grow the mushrooms. If you don't do it, then it's just good luck, right? So once these are all covered, we're going to put them in a shady place, right? So under a tree. If you have cedar is really good because cedar inhibits fungal growth. So it means that other fungi will have a harder time reaching the log and getting into it. And that's what you want. You want to be giving these mushrooms or this mycelium the best chance that you can give them, right? Because we're putting in a lot of energy and we're cutting down a tree for this. So we want it to work. But we'll talk more about that afterwards. What we're going to do now is we're going to split up into either 2s or 3s, probably 2s because we have a lot of logs, and we're going to start drilling holes and inoculating. So we'll pair off and we're going to move all the way back down there and we'll walk you through the whole process. It's important to take care of them properly. So step one, from here on out, they should not be in direct sunlight at any point. If they do, or if they are, you're just gonna bake them and that's it, right? So you wanna be keeping it in shade. So like I said, underneath some cedars is great. I think there's some cedars over there on the south side of the building. That's not gonna get any sun right there, which is awesome. Every week for the next 4 weeks, the logs need to be watered. You know, even just like 10 minutes with a hose, or if you soak them, if you have a big tank, you soak them in the tank. You need to keep it hydrated. This phase is called the spawn run, where it's starting to grow through the sapwood. And you really want to be giving it as much of a chance as you can. So keep the wood moist and keep the spawn running. After that, it's probably going to be raining, at least once a month, so it'll be fine. 1 year from now, because we're starting late in the season, normally we inoculate logs in April or early May. So 1 year from now, next April or next May, we want to take the logs and soak them in a tank for 24 hours. So if you have a little tub or somewhere, soak them for 24 hours. And what this does is it shocks the mycelium. It says, hey, it's springtime, the water's flowing, it's time to start producing mushrooms. It's time to start fruiting. That's the actual act of making the mushroom. Within 10 days of that, you're going to start seeing little pins, tiny little things. And a few days after that, they're going to be sizable mushrooms. And they're going to get bigger and bigger. In about a week, you're going to be watching them every single day at this point because they're going to grow very, very quickly. Then when they're a nice size, before the cap, the top of the mushroom curls upwards, when it's still kind of flat, that's when you want to harvest it. The whole point of a mushroom is to reproduce and pass on the spores. So once it starts releasing the spores, it says, hey, I'm done. I'm gonna start decomposing now, which means that it's less mushroom and less food for us, right? So right before it starts releasing all the spores, that's when you wanna harvest it. So for the next year, we wanna keep them horizontal, close to the ground. Mr. Harfield just got some wood there, so we're gonna be placing them on those pieces of wood, just so it's a little bit off the ground, because we want a little bit of airflow. And if we have them right on the ground, you can get some water trapped under there, and that'll make some anaerobic conditions where bacteria will grow, which you really don't want. After we shock them for 24 hours, like I said, in a year from now, we want to stand them upright. Right? That'll change the climate around the logs. If you think about the life of a mushroom, it spends most of its life underground, underneath leaves, where it's going to be warmer, it's going to be moist, it's going to be very calm. As soon as it pops through those leaves, there's wind, there's indirect sunlight, the temperature changes, it can evaporate, it gets a lot cooler, which signals, hey, it's time to produce mushrooms. So that's what we're doing. We're mimicking that change by soaking it and then putting it upright. We're trying to make it a bit cooler and give it a bit more airflow, and we can trigger these mushrooms to form. If they're stubborn, because sometimes mushrooms are shy, you want to take them and whack it with a hammer, right? You put them on the ground, like croquet style, with a big sledgehammer and thump it on the end. And that usually scares them into making mushrooms. Typically for shiitake mushrooms, but oyster, it could also work as well. But oyster is really, really vigorous mushroom, so most likely you won't have to do that. After you've picked the mushroom, put it back down and let it rest for 6 weeks. Then shock it again, harvest the mushrooms, rest it for 6 weeks. And you can do this the entire growing season, right? So I don't know how it'll work during the summertime. Maybe someone can take it home and be harvesting that during the summertime. But this will continue for about 3 to 5 years. So with 1 day of work, we're going to be getting mushrooms out of these logs for the next half decade, which is a pretty good investment of time, if you ask myself. So in a nutshell, that's log inoculation from harvesting the tree to picking the mushroom. And so if anyone has any questions, comments, I would love to take them now. If not, then I'll hand it back over to Nick. Yeah.
So it's okay to move the logs to a different location?
Yeah, actually, let's do that right now, actually. Well, unless anyone has more questions.
Well, I'm growing those from the blocks.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And they told me not to poke a hole in the bag, so I was wondering.
You know, these are pretty resilient. Once a log starts fruiting, you typically don't want to be moving it because the bark will deteriorate over time, and by moving it, there's more chance the bark's going to break off. Once the bark is off, that's it for the log, because it's just an open invite for all the microbes and bacteria and critters to come in and start munching away. So that's probably the reason why you don't want to move it around. But for now, they're absolutely fine. The bark's going to be strong and intact. Anything else?
Do you have to soak them again, like after the first fruiting?
Yeah, exactly. So once you've fruited them, you just let them rest for 6 weeks. So you're going to put them back down and just let them hang out. If it's warm and dry, if it's raining, doesn't matter. But then when you want to get more mushrooms after those 6 weeks have passed and it's recharged its batteries, soak it again.
Yeah, but what about the next year? Like, do you have to go through the whole?
Every single time. Every single time. So at some point it'll just get too cold and you'll stop getting mushrooms, and it's like, okay, you just leave it where it is. And then in the springtime, then you soak it again when it makes sense to start soaking it, right? So late, like this year was a really late spring. So yeah, just go with the season. Now,